5% remain totally unexplained.
And you're saying to 5% unexplained to the point where they are legitimately an unidentified flying object.
And we're talking about generals. We're talking about Air Force pilots. We're talking about governors of states that claim that, hey, this is beyond our understanding of the laws of physics.
Can I have an unidentified flying object that is not necessarily from some other place?
It's possible, but we've looked at all the alternatives. These are multiple sightings by multiple modes. In other words, pilots, eyewitnesses, radar, visual sightings. These are very hard to dismiss, the handful of sightings. One over Alaska, another over Belgium, another over Iran. The handful of things that still cannot be explained defy known laws of physics.
So then, by that definition, does this confirm the existence of life on other planets, in your opinion?
I wouldn't go that far. We need alien DNA or an alien chip. That would nail it to the wall right there. We don't have that. We don't have the smoking gun. But this book is as close as you're going to get to the smoking gun. We're talking about senior military officials who were involved in the investigations of these incidents saying we are clueless.
If you were to look at...
My name is Stanton T. Friedman, F-R-I-E-D-M-A-N. I'm a nuclear physicist, lecturer, author, a few other things. I've been into UFOs since 1958. I've been lecturing since 1967. Spoken at more than 600 colleges, 100 professional groups in all 50 states, 9 provinces, 14 other countries. My usual lecture is flying saucers are real! Exclamation point. By that I mean I'm convinced after studies since 1958 that the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. In other words, some UFOs are alien spacecraft. Most are not. I don't care about those.
The Americans in particular had taken the view, look, given that we terminated Project Blue Book, it would make our decision to withdraw from UFO investigations look wrong if the United Nations suddenly started taking an interest. So behind the scenes, there were efforts to really bring the whole thing into disrepute and make sure it never happened. And it's kind of easy to do. You can use phrases like little green men and flying saucers to sort of faintly ridicule the subject. No government can really go public and say, there are things in our skies, we don't know what they are, pilots chase them sometimes, but can't catch them. There are near misses between these things and commercial aircraft, which has happened on numerous occasions. You know, an admission that, well, it would be an admission that we'd lost control of our own airspace, and that's untenable for any government.
You know, no government, certainly the U.S. government, I have to say, because other governments have acknowledged UFOs, but our government does not seem to want to acknowledge that there's something in the sky they have no control over. It's huge. We don't know when it's going to come and go. We don't know why it's here. You know, I just don't think that's something that a government wants to acknowledge to people.
What we actually have found, we have captured very, very high-res photographic and radar evidence from around the world, landing case traces. And I just ask people to sort of suspend judgment and review the evidence and make their own determination as to what's going on.
Here's your list of charges. You hacked into the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Department of Defense, and NASA, amongst other things. Why?
I was in search of suppressed technology, you know, laughingly referred to as UFO technology. I think it's the biggest kept secret in the world because of its comic value. But it's a very important thing. We've got old age pensioners can't pay their fuel bills. We've got countries being invaded to award oil contracts to the West. And meanwhile, secretive parts of the secret government are sitting on suppressed technology for free energy. I was searching for files and evidence in relation to the UFO question.
What did you find inside NASA?
One of these people was a NASA photographic expert, and she said that in Building 8 of Johnson Space Center, they regularly airbrushed out images of UFOs from the high-res satellite imagery. And using the same blank password hunting technique, I got down to Building 8, got a few blank passwording machines there, and what she said was there, but it was a picture of something that definitely wasn't man-made. It was above the Earth's hemisphere. It was kind of looked like a satellite. It was cigar-shaped. It had geodesic domes above, below, to the left, to the right, and both ends of. And although it was a low-resolution picture, it was very close up. This thing was hanging in space. The Earth's hemisphere was visible below it. And No rivets, no seams, none of the stuff associated with normal man-made manufacturing.
Former astronaut Edgar Mitchell is the 6th man to walk on the moon and a firm believer that aliens have visited our planet repeatedly. So I had to ask, why are they coming in these little glancing visits and we haven't had a more meaningful dialogue or contact or attempt to communicate with these people?
Well, I think we have.
Really?
I think we have, but it is not common knowledge.
Mitchell told me after he returned from the moon, he was briefed at the Pentagon by a high-ranking officer, whose name he would not reveal, who said the U.S. government does have evidence of alien spacecraft and is keeping it a secret.
Well, I think the reason it's still a secret is power and control, controlling whatever technology exists.
Unless the Defense Department proves us otherwise, that it was probably...
There were a number of extraterrestrial vehicles out there cruising around, flying the same kind of formation we fly in our fighters. They didn't have wings, they were saucer-shaped, and we never could get as high or as fast as they were, so to really positively identify them, but they were metallic-looking and saucer in shape, and they could do a few maneuvers that we couldn't do in an airplane, like just horizontally displace themselves rapidly, be flying along and just move over rapidly.
In 1958, he was working as a project manager at Edwards Air Force Base in California.
I had a film crew working for me on a project I was doing to put a precision landing system in on the edge of the dry lake bed. And they were filming the various stages of the installation. And a small saucer apparently flew overhead and put down some landing gear and landed out on the dry lake bed, only about 50 yards out. And these were old pro cameramen who were used to flying in all kinds of vehicles to take all kinds of pictures. And so they picked up their cameras and started over toward it, going to get some close-ups. And with that, it lifted up, put the gear back in, and at a very high rate of speed disappeared. So they came in to tell me what happened. I told them to get over to the lab and develop the film immediately. And I would go and look in the book, regulation book, and see what you're supposed to do, who you have to call to report these kind of incidents, which I did. And by the time they got back with the film, there was a higher and higher and higher ranked man preceding the last one, assuring me that I had to get those negatives into a pouch, and that they had made arrangements already to get our commanding general's airplane reserved and take the films to Washington.
In an effort to organize open investigations of UFO sightings, Gordon Cooper wrote a letter to the United Nations in 1976, appealing for assistance. His letter stated, these are extraterrestrial vehicles visiting from other planets.
And it was presented to the council and certainly made a lot of people aware of a number of things that perhaps they had not been aware of before, so maybe it opened a few eyes. This universe is limitless and tremendous big universe, and we're kind of vain to think that we're the only ones that exist here.
And I was outside a school lunchroom one night, right before sundown. It was getting dark, and we were getting ready to eat supper. And I and about 25 men were standing around, and all of a sudden, in the western sky, we saw a strange light coming toward us, a round light, and it got closer and closer, and right above the pine trees, it stopped, and then it began to change colors from blue to red to white. And then it stayed there for a while. We were all aghast. We didn't know what it was. And then it just disappeared into the west. That was the end of it. So it was a genuine UFO in that it was an unidentified flying object, but I have never thought and still don't think that it's possible for, creatures from Mars to come here and visit us and go back home.
And it was summer in New York, and I had the window open, and lo and behold, there was this thing just hovering sort of 100 yards away. But I saw it so close, it wasn't in the sky or nothing, And it was like I could have hit it with a brick if I'd thrown a stone at it. I couldn't see the colors because it was dusk. It was a good, clear summer night. The sky was very clear. And round the bottom of it were just ordinary-looking electric light bulbs, blinking off and on alternatively, like on a billboard or something. And on the top of it was a red light. And the thing I noticed was that there was no noise, and I could hear that freeway down below, all the cars going. So I realized, oh, it's not a helicopter, then it must be a balloon. it was so close to the rooftop that it couldn't be a balloon. So all the rational things I went through, not a helicopter, balloon. Not a balloon, it's too close to the roof, and it's maneuvering too well to be a balloon. So I just watched it, and it was there for about 5 or 10 minutes. It went off down the East River. And
you really believe that UFOs exist? Why?
Well, I think the preponderance of anecdotal evidence from pilots, from law enforcement people, from people who've had experiences and sightings. I think also my own experience. I've had a high altitude sighting with 3 other people, and it definitely wasn't a helicopter, a jet. Now, of course, you know, a professional would discount my sighting and say, well, you don't really know. And I can't sit here and tell you 100% that I saw a craft that was created by beings from another planet outside of our sphere of technology. I can't tell you 100%. I can just tell you what I saw and what I feel. Mm-hmm. They're here. They're looking at us in a petri dish, and I gotta say, the way mankind is behaving, they're probably very disappointed.
David, why did you make this documentary?
Well, actually, in 1968, I was 7 years old, walking home from elementary school, and all these people were pointing up in the sky at this metallic dish-shaped UFO with a little, knob on the top, and it was clear. This thing was down low, 3,500 feet. If I had had a video camera back then, it would have been some of the best footage we've ever seen to date. And when you see one of these things, 20 clear minutes. People were pounding on the neighbors' doors, get out here, look at this thing. And when you look at it and you replay that in your memory, it's beyond all the videotapes and the photographs. It's so real to me, and it was so real to me at such a young age that I just couldn't ignore it. So I was engaged at 7 years old into this phenomenon.
I think it's time to open the books on questions that have remained in the dark, on the question of government investigations of UFOs. It's time to find out what the truth really is that's out there. We ought to do it really because it's right. We ought to do it because the American people, quite frankly, can handle the truth.
The captain reported that the objects began, quote, making moves that are impossible for any man-made aircraft to perform. Then, without warning, 2 of the smaller craft suddenly rose and shot directly in front of the pilot's window. The objects came so close to the aeroplane that Captain Terauchi recalled that the intense glow made his face feel warm.
All of a sudden they appear and they're traveling right in front of the aircraft. And they were sort of wobbling back and forth as they moved. They seemed to be only 1,000, maybe 2,000 feet in front of the aircraft and traveling at 600 and some miles an hour.
At that very moment, their radio link to Anchorage went dead, leaving the aircraft flying blind. A horrifying catastrophe was seconds away when the UFOs rose and veered left.
Deviate from some object, equating 240.
Spinner 1628 Heavy, deviations approved as necessary for traffic.
It's quite a big, like a formation.
In his official FAA report, Captain Terauchi said we had to get away from that object.
Spinner 1628, sir, do you still have the traffic?
Disappeared, Spinner 1628.
Spinner 1628, I understand you do not see the traffic any longer?
Okay.
I was in a capsule 60 feet underground, and the UFO was reported by my topside guard. A bright red oval object hovering outside the front gate.
He told you?
He told me. He was very agitated, frightened when he told me this over the phone. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason I believe that what he told me was true is because they had no access to our missile system. They had no way to control it. And while this object was...
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military. There's always things like that going on. Flying saucers, and they've had other things, if I'm not mistaken.
After World War II, he was assigned to an air base in Alaska, where he debriefed B-29 crews, who frequently described encounters with strange circular aircraft.
My first experience with a UFO report, personal experience that is, was when one of the crews returned and said that they saw a bogey, that's what they called them, up there that was moving at high speed at higher altitude than they could fly. And the crews later, I found out that they often referred to them as enemy aircraft or Russian aircraft, but usually bogies. And they tried to describe it, but it moved at faster speeds than anything we had. We didn't have jet airplanes then. Later we measured one that was flying 7,000 miles an hour, measured it on radar. So these clearly exceeded any of our capabilities in 1940, any capabilities of anybody in the world in 1947. On an average of about twice a month, I would get some kind of a UFO report, and they would see these circular craft, sometimes close, sometimes far, sometimes more than one. I remember a crew describing one sitting on the ice pack, and this is something we couldn't do. We didn't have any way to land up there, and they seemed to be operating in airspace without a visible support base. It took a fantastic base for us to maintain the B-29s, just to support them flying in the Arctic. I even had one crew describe one that they saw underwater that surfaced, rose off the water, and flew away. Now, this clearly exceeded any design capabilities that we knew of in the world. The B-29s flying these reconnaissance missions were equipped with a variety of cameras. At various times, they got pictures of these UFOs seen in the Arctic airspace on various of the cameras and sometimes on all of the cameras. At least this is what they reported. I never got to see any of it because we took the film cartridges out, packed it in the box, and shipped it off to Washington, to Andrews Air Force Base, where the officer was met by Pentagon intelligence and taken someplace. I never got any feedback on any of this.
I got so damn sick and tired of arguing with skeptics who have never bothered to do their homework. These guys are still living in the 19th century, many of them. And it's like I mentioned to you before, I think a lot of it is that there's a deep-seated fear that if this is really true, what's that going to mean to my view of the world? Well, it's going to mean your view of the world is going to collapse around your damn ears. The skeptics say, you can't keep secrets. The government can't keep. Well, the hell they can't. They have done it from the beginning.
I mean, my problem with UFOs is that if they exist, why do they only ever reveal themselves to the human race in ambiguous ways?
I think that maybe they're making mistakes, to be honest with you. I think that the shield comes off and they've just made a mistake.
In the case where we spoke with young children who had experienced a visitation from two UFOs and the two beings who had hovered over their playground during recess. This was at a small secondary school outside Harare in Zimbabwe, and 60 children at recess had seen these two UFOs hover, two alien beings come out, and I even remember how one little girl described it to me. She said it was as if they were kind of floating above the grass towards us, or hopping across the grass towards us.
What scared you?
The noise.
What noise?
The noise that we heard in the air.
You heard a noise in the air? What was it like? Like a roar or a buzz or a hum, or what kind of a noise?
It was like someone was blowing a flute. It was scary myself.
It was scary because you saw something yourself?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I saw little objects hovering. It was quite big actually, and then there was little ones all around it. We saw something silver, and then we quickly ran to the logs, and we saw a silver thing, and we saw a man standing next to it.
What was it? What did it feel like when he was looking at you?
I felt scared.
It felt scared? What was scary about it?
Well, I felt scared because I've never seen such a person like that before.
Did you see the eyes? What did they look like?
They were going like that.
Where was the pointy part? Was the pointy part in here, or was the pointy part out there? Up there. And what was the feeling when you looked at the eyes?
It was scary.
Mm-hmm. And what scary? Why? What made it scary?
The eyes looked evil.
Evil. Mm-hmm. And what was evil about them? Say what you mean by evil.
It looked evil because it was just staring at me.
With what? Staring at you as if what? As if to do what?
As if it wanted to come and take us.
As if it wanted to come and take you. That was the feeling you got? That it wanted you to go with it? Did you feel like you wanted to go with it? No. Did you feel, what was the effect on you when you felt it wanted to have you go with it?
I just walked away and I started crying.
They came running up here in such a panic. And, I mean, even if we had staged it, they could not have run all together like that.
When you're talking with a psychotic who's telling you something and it's a delusion and you feel that it really didn't happen, I can tell. I mean, I know this is something that person wants me to believe, or they're frightened, or they're distorting reality in some way. There's nothing like that here. These are people of sound mind, by and large, telling me something that's very, they know that I might think they're crazy, and so they're a little concerned about telling me, and they're very full of questioning themselves and doubt.
Stop the music, Governor. Did you say the United States government is covering up a history of a UFO sighting in your state? You said the government hasn't cleared this up yet. What are they hiding that you say about a UFO?
No, they haven't. Well, they don't produce documents, Chris. They should just get it all out. And there's a known history about this.
What is the conspiracy? What is your belief that they're hiding?
If they released all documents, look, I don't believe they're UFOs, but the government has not handled this well over the years. That's a historical fact.
In mid-1965, I was loaned to the Lunar Orbiter Project at NASA on Langley Field. Dr. Colley was in charge of that project. They had problems with a piece of electronic equipment that was bottlenecking their production of photographs. I went to the facility, and when I walked into the facility, there were scientists from all over the world. I was stunned, actually, to see people at a NASA project from all over the world. It didn't make any sense to me initially. I was taken into the laboratory where the equipment was malfunctioning. I couldn't repair it in the dark. I asked to have it removed. A airman second class was in the dark room at that time. I was also an airman second class. I was interested in how the whole process functioned, how the data got from the lunar orbiter to the laboratory. Asked the young man if he described the process to me. He did. About 30 minutes into the process, he said to me, in a very distressed way, by the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And then he proceeded to put photographs down in front of me, and clearly in these photographs were structures, mushroom-shaped buildings, spherical buildings, and towers. And at that point, I was very concerned because I knew we were working on compartmentalized security. He had breached security, and I was actually frightened at that moment. And I did not question him any further. And a few moments later, someone did come into the room. I worked there for 3 more days, and I remember going home and naively thinking, I can't wait to hear about this on the evening news. And here it is, more than 30 years later, and I hope we hear about it tonight. And I will testify under oath before Congress.
So it has often been said that why don't astronomers see UFOs? As a matter of fact, they do. In a very recent report by Professor Sturrock of Stanford University, who queried all the members of the American Astronomical Society, found that 53% of those who responded said that, in their opinion, the UFO problem was worthy of scientific study. And what is more, 64 of the astronomers who responded gave what would be called UFO reports, objects, sightings that they personally had made at their observatories frequently, which to them was unexplained.
Dr. Hynek was officially researching UFOs for the U.S. Air Force and compiling a classified report known as Project Sign, later to become known as Project Blue Book.
I started almost as a complete skeptic because I thought the whole thing was a question of post-war nerves, but it was the persistence of the phenomenon, it refused to dry up and blow away, that finally led me to the belief that we had a real phenomenon to deal with. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the advent of the flying saucer, and that is a most unfortunate term, in my opinion, because it invites ridicule. It opens the door to a great deal of buffoonery and lampooning. It had a perfectly good history because when Kenneth Arnold described the motions of the discs that he had seen, he said that it was like...
The object comes towards them on a bearing about 40 degrees, about the 2 o'clock position roughly, relative to their heading. Comes down to their altitude, and the witnesses claim that this was a triangle, an equilateral triangle, whose sides were vertical, if you can think of that. So it isn't a thin triangle, it's a thick triangle, about 6 stories high. What's that, 60 feet, 70 feet thick, and at least, I forget that the estimate was hundreds of feet side to side to side on the 3 sides, and a triangular opening in the middle. And the pilot said it was such a huge opening that he was contemplating flying through the middle of this thing to avoid it. The object comes to an instantaneous stop at some unknown distance, where they don't know how far away it was, and reverses 180 degrees and goes off as it has come at a high speed until it's out of sight. Well, as interesting as that case is, that's a non-aerodynamic vehicle as far as I'm concerned. It's not ball lightning. It's not birds. It's not a balloon for lots of reasons. It's not stealth technology, because you'd never build anything that's stealth that way. We don't know its propulsion. It did not produce a shock wave. In that case, there were no electromagnetic effects as it was near the airplane. Perhaps the earlier effects, we don't know. It had very bright round lights, like headlights, along this 60-foot high front facing it. It flew front forward, by the way, not point forward. Each of these round lights were estimated to be 6 feet in diameter and white. So you can calculate the megawatts that are required to light those searchlights up, whatever they are. And by the way, I don't think they're portholes, and I don't think they're lights. I think they're a direct artifact of the propulsion system.
In 1969, I received a priority message from a ship near Alaska that was classified as secret. The ship reported merging out of the ocean near Port Bow a brightly glowing reddish-orange elliptical object, approximately 70 feet in diameter, emerged out of the water, shot into space, traveling at about 7,000 miles per hour. This was tracked on ship's radar and substantiated. Years later, I worked at the Naval Electronic Engineering Center in San Diego for 13 years. The co-worker who I worked with worked at the NORAD facility. When he first started working at the facility, he noticed objects going on the screens that track everything out in space and in the air, objects going off the scale, doing right-angle turns. When he inquired, his older supervisor advised him that, quote,
What's the official policy that I think we should establish?
Yes, I think so. In the early 1950s, about the mid-1950s, the government of Australia, along with the governments of America and United Kingdom, thought there might be some threat to national security with the sightings of all these peculiar happenings. So they asked the IAAF to investigate all the reports and come up with the facts. And after about 10 or 12 years, we could not produce any information that suggested there were any interlopers from outer space. The 10% or so unexplained, we couldn't explain, but on the other hand, they didn't suggest any interlopers.
In this recently uncovered interview by Open Minds, Colonel Philip J. Corso claims that while he was the chief of the Army's Foreign Technology Division in the early 1960s, he made then Attorney General Robert Kennedy aware of an alien presence. Colonel Corso claims he spoke with Robert Kennedy face to face.
He knew about the flying saucers. I talked to him about it. I used to meet him when he was Attorney General right in his office.
My name is Wilfried de Brouwer. I'm a retired Major General of the Belgian Air Force, and I was Chief Operations in the Air Staff at the time that an exceptional UFO wave took place over Belgium. Indeed, during the evening of 29 November 1989, in a small area in eastern Belgium, approximately 140 UFO sightings were reported. Hundreds of people saw a majestic triangular craft with a span of approximately 120 feet, powerful beaming spotlights moving very slowly without making any significant noise, but in several cases accelerating to very high speeds. The following days and months, many more sightings would follow. The UFO wave would last more than a year, during which a Belgian UFO organization conducted more than 650 investigations and recorded more than 400 hours of audio witness reports. On one occasion, a photograph revealed the triangular shape and 4 light beams of the object. I have the photograph here if you want to see more details later on, but at the left, at your left, you see the original photograph. At the right, you can see an overexposed photograph which reveals the shape of the craft. In first instance, and in consultation with other NATO partners, I could confirm that no flights of stealth aircraft or any other experimental aircraft took place in the airspace of Belgium. In addition, the civil aviation authorities confirmed that no flight plans had been introduced. This implied that the reported objects or craft committed an infraction against the existing aviation rules. In short, the Belgian UFO wave was exceptional and the Air Force could not identify the nature, origin and intention